Well, how do you come up with an energy accord when there's discord among the people who need to sign it? As you know, the accord is one of the goals as the premiers have gathered in Halifax, but royalties from the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline seems to have taken over as an issue. Major disagreement between the premiers of BC and Alberta, and our own premier's been weighing in on this as well. Brad Wall joins me now from Halifax. Good morning.
Morning, Sheila.
So how has all of this, it's been front page news, leading the newscasts, how has all of this affected the mood at the meetings that you're at right now?
Well, I don't think it's affected the mood. I don't think it's particularly helpful because we had a full agenda going into the meeting and some important things to achieve. As you know, Premier Giz and myself, we've been asked to chair a working group of health ministers and provide some real specific recommendations on how we can start to improve healthcare delivery in the country and in the long term bend the cost curve. And there's other important items on the agenda. This obviously sucks up some oxygen certainly in the room, and it's a bit of a distraction, but I don't think it's affected the mood. And frankly, I think that now we've seen a couple of days of media. We actually begin our meetings in earnest today, and I think we're going to just move on.
Yeah, and Alison Redford says this isn't the time or place, but Christy Clark says it needs to be talked about. Where do you come down on that?
Well, I think it has been talked about. BC's demanded royalties, and Alberta said no. And I'm not sure where it goes from here. I think British Columbians are right to want to make sure that the risks they're bearing for a project like this are compensated. And also that that we're mitigating environmental risks, that we're avoiding the risks in the first place. I note that Enbridge, I think, announced a $500 million investment to improve the quality, the thickness of the pipeline, for example, on that front. And if there's to be some sort of quote-unquote benefit sharing for British Columbians, which might be very reasonable, I think that should come from companies. We have some oil companies on the other end who will be making more money with access to a world price, the Brent price for crude, rather than the lower price we receive in North America, with the West Texas price. And we also have the pipeline company that makes some money. But to ask for the royalties from another province, I think sets a dangerous precedent. We ship uranium out of our province, 20% of the world's supply. Chemicals move across Canada in rail cars every day that might be potentially dangerous or have an environmental impact. We ship up to 30% of the world's potash out of our province.
Of course, shipping potash doesn't carry the same risks with it as oil pipelines.
But the problem is that it's difficult to accept. Politics seems to be the precedence business, Sheila, in my view. And so while some have said, well, this is bitumen and it's different. Well, is it different than yellowcake, A and B? Is it really different in the long term from other major resources, which maybe don't carry the environmental risk, but provide a benefit to the owners of the resource, in our case, Saskatchewan, because that's where the resource is located. There's also been a great benefit to parts of our country that have access to ports, that have the port economic development and have had it for decades. We don't have that, obviously, in Saskatchewan. I don't think there's any prospects for a port anytime soon. So we don't have those benefits, but we're fortunate to have the resources. I just think it sets a dangerous precedent. There may well be opportunity for the companies to be providing more of a benefit. That's reasonable. Saskatchewan could perhaps play the role of honest broker in that, and may have offered it, in fact. But I think this sets a dangerous precedent, and now we're at a point where obviously this issue isn't going anywhere, I don't think.
Why not just let these two premiers sort it out? I know Jean Charest was asked about this, and he said, that's a very good question. I'm not going to answer it. Other premiers have made a point of staying out of this one and letting Premiers Redford and Clark duke this out.
Well, Premier Charest has actually commented a bit. He went a bit further. He said we want each province to respect each other's borders when it comes to natural resources. So, we also have something at stake in this debate. If it is to set a precedent, we ship increasingly more goods through the Asia-Pacific Gateway. Some of them may or may not have environmental impact, I guess, if there's a problem. I do think that there's a principle here, and when asked the question, we try to answer it. We basically did the same thing yesterday. Of saying, look, it's time to sort of move on. Everyone stated their position, and we have other work to do here.
By now, everyone's heard this clip, I'm sure, from Christy Clark.
If Alberta doesn't want to talk about it and doesn't want to come to the table, there isn't going to be a project.
All right, there isn't going to be a project. What would be at stake for Saskatchewan if that's not just posturing?
Well, as you know, even the report that British Columbia cites points to an economic benefit for this particular project of upwards of $4 billion. That may be a little light, actually. By the way, some of the problem with BC's analysis is that we weren't consulted on our part of it. As far as I know, our energy and resources officials are casting about, and they can't seem to see where they were consulted on it. It may be a little light, actually. Secondly, the report intimates that we're producing oil sands as well, which, of course, we're not. It's not economic yet to do so because of the geology in the province.
But
So
it probably will be, though.
Well, I'm not sure that's a fair statement, actually.
No?
The geology is a bit of a challenge, and companies have had to run at it. It might be, certainly, but right now we're not. That's the point. I guess the BC numbers said that was the case. So, it has an impact on all of us in Canada because of pipeline capacity issues that do affect Saskatchewan right now in terms of the movement of that oil. We'd like one day to be able to get our oil to a point where we could access, on behalf of the owners of the resource, the people of Saskatchewan, that higher Brent price.
Where do you see this headed, though? I mean, does it need federal intervention? John Baird has sort of signaled that he's on the side of Premier Redford, saying that he doesn't want to see some kind of a toll system in Canada. But is it going to take federal intervention? What do you think it's going to take to resolve this?
I'm not sure what the federal government can do. By the way, when British Columbia says no, I guess they're talking about, and they've said they could unduly delay it in terms of processing permits or by refusing to sell it electricity from BC Hydro. I'm not sure that's constitutional, Sheila. I think there's a section in the Constitution, I think it's Section 121, that speaks to this country wanting to ensure the promotion, the facilitating of interprovincial trade and commerce, national trade and commerce. So, I mean, I guess on a de facto basis or notionally they could delay it and maybe kill it. But it may not be constitutional, which also raises a whole bunch of other questions.
Does that mean that could be headed for the courts?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, we're going to be moving on today to work on healthcare and other issues we want to do. And it is what Premier Charest said yesterday is certainly true to this extent that we do have, each other province has a stake in this, but this is an issue between BC and Alberta.
All right. Mr. Wall, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Sheila. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.